We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Amud Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 70b. On the previous Amud, the Brisa was discussing the pasuk v'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa. The pasuk is talking about the fact that the chelev is pure, it's tar, it doesn't have that tumas nevela. And the Brisa brought two arguments. You could say that this pasuk is talking about a kosher animal. You could say a non-kosher animal. And the Brisa now continues, K'sheba b'derech zuhi b'tzahora, K'sheba b'derech zuhi b'tmeya. If we go with this logic, it's going to be talking about a kosher animal. We go with the other logic, it's talking about a non-kosher animal. So how can we determine what the pasuk is actually talking about? Talmud lomar treifa. The pasuk says again, it says treifa v'chelev treifa. And we learn from that pasuk, Misha yesh b'mina treifa. We're talking about an animal where you have within that animal a concept of treifa. So therefore I can exclude the non-kosher animal, she'ein b'mina treifa, where you don't have a concept of treifa because it's not kosher anyway, you can't eat it anyway. So what difference would it make if it's treifa? V'lo otzias achai, but I'm not going to exclude a wild animal from this pasuk, she'yesh b'mina treifa. So then I'm going to exclude a non-kosher animal, but I should conclude that I'm not going to exclude a chai, a wild animal, because there you do have a concept of treifa. So at this point we would say that the pasuk is at least talking about chaya as well. Talmud lomar, no, the pasuk says v'achol lo sochlu. It says in the pasuk you can't eat it, and we understand from that part of the pasuk mi shechel ba'asar uvesara mutter. We're talking specifically about the kind of animal where the fat is asar to eat and the basar, the meat, is mutter to eat. Yatsa chaya, that excludes a wild animal. Shechel ba'uvesara mutter, where both the fat and the meat are mutter to eat, and that's how we know that the pasuk is not talking about a non-kosher animal, and it's also not talking about a chaya. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Yaakov bar Abba l'Rava. Rav Yaakov bar Abba said to Rava, Ela me'ata, but according to the Brisa, Nivlas behema tahora hu demetama, we should conclude that the nevel of a kosher animal is tameh, and Nivlas behema tameh lo metama, we should say that the nevel of a non-kosher animal is not tameh. That's what it seemed to be saying at the end of the Brisa. It said by a non-kosher, it said that there's no tumah. Amar le, he said back to him, Kama savish shevishtu ba, how many elders have made a mistake with the end of the Brisa? And this Rashi already explained on the previous Amud, say for the end of the Brisa, where it seems to be saying a non-kosher animal, it does not have tumas nevela. It's not talking about a non-kosher animal. Asol nivlas of tame. That line in the Brisa is talking about a nivlas of tame. It's talking about the nevela of a bird that's not kosher, and that actually is tar. That actually does not have the tumas beis habliya, which only applies to nivlas of tar. And Rashi explains, Ela me'ata masnisa parach, we're asking on the words of the Brisa itself here. To katani makish atir mechlal nevela b'tmeya v'lo b'torah, it says that when it comes to nevela, it's pure by a non-kosher. What's that talking about? And he said, Kama savi shavishtu ba, to me ani al zakenim merubin, shekemoschem shenishtabashtem, but there were many elders who made this mistake. Seifa de katani tir mechlal nevela, when it says at the end that if it's not kosher, it doesn't have that tumas nevela, ason lenivlas of tame, that's talking about the nevela of a non-kosher bird. Shetiaro hakasam ilatami bebeis habliya. There we say again that there is no tumas beis habliya. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo tir Rabbi Meir ela b'tmimin. When Rabbi Meir says in the Mishnah, he's talking about the malika of a bird that's a treifa. So Rabbi Meir says that in that situation we say that it is tar, it doesn't have that tumas beis habliya. That's only if it does not have a blemish. Aval b'bali mumin lo, he wouldn't say it by bali mumin. If it has a blemish, then he would not say that it purifies from the tumas nevela. Rabbi Lazar Amar, Rabbi Lazar says, Afilu b'bali mumin, even by bali mumin, Rabbi Meir would say that it's pure even in that situation. Rashi explains, Lotir Rabbi Meir b'malikas treifa ela b'tmimim, to shaycho bu malika, because by an animal that it does not have a blemish, so malika is relevant over there, and therefore the malika, even though it's a treifa, the malika is going to be able to purify, but that's not going to be true if it has a blemish. Rabbi Lazar says, no, it's true even in a situation of a blemish. And the Gemara continues, Itmar Nami was stated as well. Amar Rav Bevi, Amar Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Bevi says that Rabbi Lazar says, Metar Haya Rabbi Meir b'balei mumin. Rabbi Meir says tahar even if it has a blemish. Va'afilu be'avozim v'tar nagolim. This is true even by geese and by chickens. And Rashi explains, V'afilu be'avozim delav b'nei mizbeachin. These are not the kinds of birds that go on the mizbeach at all. Uvilvad shehu kachim b'fnim. As long as it's kachim that happens inside the azara, that's enough to purify. To hatreifanami lo chazi. you, because even let's say you had the proper kinds of birds, but if it was treifa, that's not fit to go on the mizbeach. B'torah uvenayona, for example, by doves and pigeons. V'tiara ho'elu malika hechsher kodshim bifnimhi. But still, we say that it purifies because malika is the type of preparation. That's the way that you do preparation for kodshim within the azara, and so therefore, again, it applies even by avozin and tarnagolin. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah asks the following question, Araf Eiz Mahu, what if the neck of the goat is broken? In that situation, does that purify it? Is it not considered an avela in terms of Tumas Nevela? Evozin v'tarnagolin taimamai, what's the reason by geese and by chickens that we say, again, in a situation of malika, we say they're purified, Mina de ofos ninu, because still they are a kind of bird. Aval Eiz, but by a goat, lav mina de egla ninu, that's not a kind of egla. Here we're comparing to the egla arufa. The egla arufa, the way that you kill the egla arufa is by breaking the neck, so maybe we should say, if you break the neck of the goat, it's the same thing, it's purified. Oh, Dilmor, maybe, mina de behemahu, maybe it is a kind of a domesticated animal, and so therefore it's included in the same category. And the Gemara continues, Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamar lo lahashmaita. Rav Dimi was sitting and he said over this teaching, Amar le Abaye, Abaye said to him, Mechlal, this entire discussion implies, to egla arufa tahorahi, that the egla arufa itself is actually pure. That's not considered a nevela. It's not a carcass that would convey tumah. Amar le said to him, yes, that's true. It is actually pure. Amri devei Rabbi Yanai, they say in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, kapara ksiv bo kekachim, because it says kapara, it says it's an atonement, it's treated just like kachim, and therefore again, it is in fact purified. Rashi explains, Araf Eiz al hacholol b'makom egla harufa. Arufa, again, he does this, let's say there's a dead body, Rashi understands, just like you do the procedure of egla harufa by a dead body, so let's say you do that by a goat. Mahul Rabbi Meir, what would be according to Rabbi Meir? Mi amrinam ki hechi demetaher malikas avozin kodshim bifnim. Do we say, just like we say the malika of geese, we're going to say pure, hoel umalikas shum of bifnim, since at the end of the day it is the malika of a bird bifnim, hachanama reifa hechsher taras eglohi midei nevei. Look at Amin al-Kamon. So to over here, again, breaking the neck would purify by the egla, maybe that applies by the Eiz as well. Aval Eiz lav mina de eglu, or maybe we would say a goat is not a kind of egla, shazumin gasa v'zumin daka, one's a larger animal, the egla is a larger animal, the Eiz is a smaller kind of animal. And again, the Gemara went on to say that the whole discussion implies that the egla arufa is tahora, and the Gemara said, indeed, that is the case. And the Gemara continues, Mesiv Rav Nosson Avua de Rav Huna. Rav Nosson, the father of Rav Huna, asked the following question. It says in the Braisa that the pasuk says, V'achol lo sochlu. Again, this is the pasuk by Chalev. The pasuk again is saying that the Chalev is pure, even though the animal itself, the nevela of the kosher animal itself, is impure, but the Chalev is pure. And so we learn from this pasuk, Ein li ala Chalev she'asar ba'achilu mutar b'hana. The Braisa says, one might think this is true only by Chalev, which one cannot eat, but you're allowed to derive benefit. There we say that the Chalev is pure. But Chalev shel shor haniskol v'egla arufa minayin. From where do we know the Chalev of a shor haniskol, that's an ox that needs to be stoned, or of an egla arufa, again, that's the egla that you're going to break the neck. So in those situations, it's actually asr b'hana as well. So how do we know if it's asr b'hana that it's pure? Talmud lomar kol chalev. The pasuk says kol chalev, and that says it applies to all chalev. And so the Braisa here essentially is saying that we need a pasuk to tell us that this applies by chalev, which is asr b'hana, that the chalev is pure, even in that situation. And the Gemara says, V'isal kadaitich. Now, if it should enter your mind that egla arufa tahorahi, if we're saying over here that egla arufa itself, that the meat itself is pure, there's no tumas nevela at all, so what would even be the thought that the chalev should be impure? It doesn't even make sense that the Braisa needs a pasuk to say that the chalev is pure, otherwise we would have thought otherwise. Why would we think that? He tahora v'chel batame, would we possibly say that it itself is pure and the chalev is tame? That wouldn't make any sense, and therefore it seems obvious that if the egla arufa is tahora, this Braisa does not make sense to need a pasuk. It should be obvious that the chalev is pure as well. And the Gemara says, Heicha da'aref mi'aref. In a situation where you actually broke the neck of the egla, so lo etzrichole, so there it actually is not necessary. You're correct. There it's obvious, because there again we say it's pure. It's not considered nevela, and so if it's not nevela, of course the chalev also will be pure. But ki etzricha, when is it necessary to teach that the chalev is pure? Heicha deshachta mishchat. Let's say instead of breaking the neck, you slaughtered the animal, you slaughtered the egla, so there already, in that situation, it wouldn't be so obvious. But the Gemara still asks, V'tahani le'shchita letara midei nevela. Why isn't it obvious? The shchita also should be effective to purify it from being nevela, from having that tumah. And so again, it should be obvious there as well. And so the Gemara says, lo no tzricha, it's necessary. Shemesa, let's say neither was done, it wasn't slaughtered, the neck wasn't broken, it just died. So in such a situation, there's nothing to purify it from Tumas Nevela. And so the question is the chaylev pure or not? That's what we need a pasuk to teach us, that the chaylev is pure. And the Gemara says, Mechlal, well, this entire discussion implies the mechayim asura. It seems like already from while it is alive, already it is asur. And the Gemara means to say that the prohibition to derive benefit from the egla arufa is true even when the egla arufa is alive. That's why, again, there would have been a thought to say that the chaylev, maybe the chaylev is not pure, and we need a pasuk to say that it's pure. And the Gemara says, yes, indeed, that is true. Already, it's already prohibited to get benefit from the egla arufa even while it is alive. Amar Rabbi Yanai says, Gevul Shamati, I heard a boundary about this in terms of when exactly does this Isser Hana, when does it start by the egla arufa? So I heard a boundary, V'shachachti, and I forgot what it was. V'nosvin Chavrayu L'meimar Yiridosel Nachal Eson Hio Sarta. And the group of scholars, they were inclined to say that once it goes to the Nachal Eson, that's the hard valley already at that point in time, that's when it becomes prohibited to derive benefit from the Egla Arufa. And Rashi explains, Shemesa, again, we're talking about an Egla Arufa that the neck was not broken, it just died. The Hashta Besara Tameya, that in that case the meat is Tameh. Ve'itzrich L'tar Chelba, and we have to have a pasuk to teach us that the Chaylev is pure. Shalo Tomar Lo Tira L'Chaylev Sha'ata Korei Bo Yasal L'chal Malacha, because again, you shouldn't say that the purity of the chaylev only applies when it's permitted to get benefit. It's not true. The purity applies even in this situation where you can't get benefit. And the Gemara then said, Mechlal de mechayim asura. This implies that while it was alive, it was prohibited. V'afa pishalo nerafa. The point is, even though the neck wasn't broken, apparently there still is. It's still forbidden to get hana. Midiktani chaylev egla arufa minayim, from the fact that it says, how do I know the chaylev of the egla arufa that it's pure? V'ukimta b'shemesin. We're saying that it's a case where the neck wasn't broken, it just died. So that implies again that the Isser Hana already set in. Gvul Shamati ba me'emasai. I did hear a boundary from when it is Asr b'Hana. V'nosvin Chavrayu Suvurin HaTalmidim Midaitam Lomar. The students thought to say on their own that again Yiridasa, when it goes down to the Nachal Eson, that's the point in time when it becomes Asr. Hadran Allah Chatas Ha'of. We will return to you. Perek Chatas Ha'of. And this is the end of the 7th parak of Meseches Zevachim. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 8th parak of Meseches Zevachim. And the parak begins with the Mishnah, Kol hazvachim shenisarvu b'chatos hamesos, all sacrifices that get mixed up with chatos hamesos, those are animals that are carbon chatos that have to die. O b'shor haniskol, or an ox that needs to be stoned, it's prohibited to get benefit from. Afilu achas beribo, even 1 in 10,000, yamusu kulan, they all have to die. Nisarvu b'shor shenevda bo avera, let's say they get mixed up with an ox, which an avera was committed. Or... And Rashi explains, Kol hazvachim afilu achas beribo hashta mashma. Right now, it's understood to mean achas kasher, you have 1 kosher animal. Beribo shel chatos hamesos, gets mixed up with 10,000 of chatos that have to die. Hilkach parach begemara, and therefore, since that's the understanding, the Gemara is going to ask, my afilu, what does it mean even? Ha havu mesos ruba. In this situation, you have many that are supposed to die. You have a lot. So why afilu achas beribo? The katani shenisarvu bechatos hamesos, because it's getting mixed up with the chatos hamesos. The fact that you have a lot of chatos hamesos makes it even more obvious that everything should die. And Rashi says, Chomesh chatos mesos ninu, there are 5 chatos that have to die. Vlad chatos, the offspring of a chatos. V'chatos shemesu ba'ala, if you have a chatos where the owner died. Utmuras chatos, the substitute of a chatos. V'shekipru ba'ala v'sha'avda, and if the owner's already got atonement and it was lost. V'shenimtzis ba'alas mum, if it turned out that it had a blemish. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph.